Okay, one topic that we have not really talked about before or touched on much at all, but I think is really relevant to all of you and us as coaches as well, is around climbing shoes. And that's about, what is the best climbing shoe for what you're doing, and how should you choose those climbing shoes? And we know there's lots and lots of them out there on the market, and I thought it'd be really good just to go through some of the very basic elements of what you're looking for in a climbing shoe, depending on your specialization, your needs, etc. If I'm to break it down, I think there's 4 main areas that you want to look at when choosing a climbing shoe. Now, the first is shoe fit. The second is shoe rubber. Next up is the shoe opening or closure system. And the last one is the shape or the amount of downturn on a shoe. So let's work through each of those one by one and talk through them and why you would look at different elements. Okay, so first up, when we look at a climbing shoe, there's a number of different elements to it. We've obviously got the front section of the shoe that we're going to use, which is making a lot of contact typically with the rock or plastic. The midsection, which often carries a lot of the tension and the stiffness in the shoe. And then also the heel, the back of the shoe. We've got the closure system. We've got the degree of kind of aggression or downturn on the shoe. So how much is that shoe downturned? And then also the softness of the rubber and the kind of, I guess you can term it as the stickiness and how it adheres to different sizes, shapes, and styles of holes. So let's first off talk about fit. And I kind of class that as being, do you want a really super tight pair of shoes? And how do they need to actually kind of place on your foot? Now, in terms of tightness, there are different opinions on this, and I think there's no right answer, but on the whole, you want a pair of shoes which are comfortable, but you don't want to be able to wear these all day long if you're talking about real climbing performance. I've seen too many people in the gym when they've got their shoe inside or their foot inside their shoe, and there is so much bagginess and there's these huge dead spots. And if you look at the shoe, when they place it on a hold, this top area, the upper, is rucking up and you can see huge amounts of dead space. Same again around the heel. So you want a nice, tight, comfortable position, fit, but without the dead spots in the shoe. You can, if you get to the sort of way of climbing or the fit of the shoe, where they're very, very tight, use a little trick that I will show you with a piece of plastic. So this is like a bit of plastic from a plastic bag for getting on very tight shoes and using the tabs at the back. Good little trick that many of us use because it's hard getting on very, very tight shoes. And also with the shoe, which we'll talk about in a second, is the closure system. So whether it's Velcro, lace, or just a standard slip-on as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you the trick for the plastic bag trick. And you need a reasonable sized piece to be able to do this with. Don't go too small, you won't get the coverage on your heel. I have seen people do this with an entire plastic bag, so you could use that, but I think just a sort of square works well enough. Okay, so with this shoe here, it's really tight, and if I try and get this one on without my plastic bag, I can, but I'm gonna be pulling very hard on these tabs. It's not always the nicest thing to do when I'm warming up, and I've kind of, not got my fingers warm and I'm cranking right down the tabs. But if I slip that piece of plastic in there behind my heel, and then I pull with my tabs, just to get my toes in nice and deep in it, and then my foot slides in really nicely, and I've got a super tight pair of shoes that fit me really well. They've slipped in. You can see actually that there's virtually none of the plastic even, sticking out. So aesthetically, it's kind of still quite nice. You haven't got a huge plastic bag sticking out. And also, that doesn't slip off. I've got no problems with that. And my shoe's gone on and it's not been a massive fuss. So Hope you like that little trick. Okay, in terms of stickiness is when you look across your shoe brands, you'll find that often if you look on the sole of the shoe, there'll be some kind of reference to the type of rubber used in them. And a lot of the shoes, so I think this one has an RH next to it. If I look on this one here, this has a VD. So there'll be different elements of durability and stickiness in these shoes. And you want to have a look at the shoes that you're choosing and match them up with the style of climbing that you're going for. So in my experience, if you're looking for a much smearier, flatter, standing on big volumes, big flat holds, you want lots of comfort, you're looking for a softer rubber, but it'll have a high degree of stickiness. If you want something that's really good for edging and standing on very small edges, but also has a high degree of durability, you want a much harder rubber. And if you talk to any shoe retailer that's good and knows what they're doing, they'll tell you those differences on all the shoe models. So remember, on any particular brand, there's quite a bit of difference across those shoe durabilities and stiffness and stickiness. In terms of opening, I've got here a lace-up shoe. These were very traditional for years and years, and whilst it hasn't moved away from a position where I go, don't choose lace-up shoes, I think you need to look at carefully the shape and the design of how this closure system works so that you can close up and adjust on any of those dead spots. And particularly with narrower-feeted people or narrow-footed people, is you want to be able to really close and cinch that lace system down so you get a really good fit on the shoe. Next up is your traditional Velcro system, which I think is a nicest mid-ground in terms of training shoe, performance shoe. You get a really big open on the shoe, plenty of spit. So if you've got someone that has slightly larger ankles, larger feet, wider feet, get a really nice large opening on the shoe, and then you can cinch that close and again adjust for whatever width you have on your shoe. Really nice, versatile system. Traditionally, I've mostly gone for that Velcro fit shoe. Lastly, you have a slipper variant of shoe, and this one actually has an additional Velcro that goes on it so you can actually tighten it up a little bit more. But you have in the center part of the shoe, sometimes it's on the side as well, is a really tight, stiff elastic that will allow you to open up that shoe and put your foot in, but it'll still remain really snug. I think the shoes are often, sort of like, they're like a mock or a nice flat slip are really nice for training. They're often a lot more comfortable and they can be slipped on and off. You've got to think about Velcro systems, laces, but you do need to go for a really, really precise fit on these. And I think the slip-on is the one that you need to play around with in the shop or doing testing of your friend's shoes the most to get the fit exactly right, because there's a lot more potential for dead spots and relaxation of the shoe. Last thing that I think is very, very important to look at, and the mistake that I see people making is that they will look at what the pros wear all the time. And if you look at anything on Instagram, YouTube, of very good climbers climbing, they typically have a very downturn shoe. So you can see that kind of banana shape in the shoe. And they will go, right, my favorite superstar is wearing a downturn shoe climbing this V15, V14, 9A, etc. So therefore, that's the best possible choice for me. And that's appropriate for me when I'm climbing a different grade and I'm maybe earlier on in my climbing career. But that's not necessarily true, because you have two very different options on this. You have that downturn shoe, but you also have a much flatter shoe. So you can see across here, there's very little difference in the rise of the heel to the toe. And this is also a very, very good option for any climber, whether actually you're more intermediate, beginner, all the way through to advanced. I use a lot of flat shoes, but the advantage with your flat shoe is that this is going to perform invariably in a much better way in a smearing position, longer routes, longer days, a little bit more comfort carried through the shoe. And also if you have a stiff shoe, so stiffness all the way from heel to toe, this will still remain really good all day long or all hour long if you're on a much longer route. So I think flat shoes are very good in that circumstance. Where they really tend to fall down is on much steeper terrain, because with your downturn shoe, you're able to claw in and sort of edge and hook on those holds. And I also think that you find your foot position intuitively leads into a much more aggressive approach with your heel. And it seems to just position people into using their heels more effectively when you've got that downturn banana position. There is one last thing to add into this, is that if you can find the perfect sweet spot on a shoe that doesn't have too much downturn and aggression, but also has a nice stiff rubber with it, it's actually very, very good for edging as well. So it's just in that mid spot. I know a lot of very good climbers that spend a lot of time trying to find that sweet spot of downturn, stiffness and performance. So I hope you found that useful, and a little talk through of what I think you should be looking for in climbing shoes. There's loads and loads of different brands out there, lots of different rubbers, you know, shoe openings, everything, so much to look at. So take your time, play around with it, make sure you try it in different environments as well, because they will perform differently, and just get involved, keep experimenting, and no one shoe is the perfect shoe.